Hey, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today for the show. I appreciate it.
No problem. No problem, Joe.
So before we get into your world of education and all of the wonderful things that you're doing, the one thing that was such a big and I come from education too. I work in that industry. One of the big things that really affected and shook the ground hard was living through this pandemic. For all the kids, for everybody that was educating, everybody that was a part of this process. So ultimately, how did you get through that time period and what residuals have you noticed since then?
Wow. I think that's a really good question. It forced me to kind of reflect on the time that maybe some of us want to block out a little
Yeah.
bit. And so, but I do think it's important that we take some of those nuggets and kind of the gems that we got from the pandemic. But the pandemic was extremely hard for many students, many leaders, many teachers. As we know, that education has been pretty much the same since its inception, right? I can talk to my mom or my grandparents about their educational experience, and it was pretty much the same. There were desk and rows with a board at the front and a teacher who stands up and speak, and there's a book, and now kids have Chromebooks, and many of that has been the same since we started education. And so I do think that the pandemic and all of its challenges force some innovation to kind of propel much faster when it came to how do we educate our students? How do we educate them from home? How do we leverage technology that many of us can't remove their cell phones from their hands in the middle of the day? How do we actually leverage these tools or the resources that teachers receive in a much more meaningful way? I mean, we have some teachers who are probably great at leveraging their Corinthian boards or smart boards. And we have some teachers like, I will never touch one. And I think now we have a much more folks in leadership roles, and I consider teachers as leaders in their classrooms who are accessing technology in a much more comfortable and confident way that allows them to connect with their students in a much more meaningful way. And so I'm hopeful to see even post-pandemic. I mean, I'm an extrovert, so I love to be in person. I get my energy from being with people and talking to people. But for our introverts, it may work well to continue in the spaces like Zoom that allow them to have a little bit more control of their day and when they need a little bit of self-care time, the same for our students. And so we are seeing that a lot of schools are continuing to leverage technology in a much more meaningful way of communicating not only with the student, but also with their families, which they had to do during the pandemic. And I don't think that was actually leveraged as much as we should have been prior to the pandemic.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's stay in this education mindset here. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third graders. And on paper, you're the executive director at Surge. But if one of the kids was like, "What do you do? What is your job?" How do you answer that child?
Wow, that's funny. I was a third grade teacher, so kind of
Okay.
perfect.
Look at
Um,
that.
I mean, I think the most simple way that I would explain is that my job is to support a small entity that is trying to change the world and just make it better for you and for the future. I think the core of my job is to make sure that I can find money to ensure that really, really smart people can do really, really good work for you, your community, and for the world. So that is how I would
I
explain
love
my
it.
job.
They would totally get that. So was it always education for you? Did you always dream of becoming a teacher?
Absolutely not. I never dreamed of being a teacher. My goal was to become president of the United States by 2020. It is no longer my goal, so we're safe. But yeah, I was fortunate to go to the University of Illinois in Champaign. I was a debater in high school. I was like, I want to get into public work. Major political science, got a master's degree in political science, studied in other countries. But I came out of graduate school during a recession. And so finding a job was extremely difficult. Many folks were going back to school, so trying to get into an MBA program or a law program was extremely challenging during that time. And so I have a mom who is like all mothers, will hold you accountable, and said, I don't care how many degrees you got. You need to go find a job. You need to find one that you enjoy. And I was working for a small nonprofit at the time, which was great, but not as fulfilling that I felt like the impact that I wanted to have. And I ended up applying for a alternative teaching program here in Chicago that allowed me to stay here in Chicago and teach third grade and teaching in a low income, but not low in brilliance, not low in greatness, not low in any of those magnificent things. Um, in that community on the other side of town for me, I taught all boys. Third grade, which is high pressure because it's the first time they're tested, but it is also the time that kids are really still loving learning and coming to school and just having all black boys in front of me every day. It was the bug that got me, and I got stuck, and I actually love being in the classroom. And because of the work I did also with the community with my parents in the classroom, I was brought into our central office at Chicago Public Schools after some cuts, and they asked me to come to central office where I led family community engagement work, was really the really a pivotal point in my education career that allowed me to not only focus on student pedagogy instruction, but also how do we engage our families to be a part of what pedagogy means and instruction and teaching and engaging them in their families. And so I've done a number of other things since from external affairs, working in charter, both charter and public, make large national nonprofit organizations. But my life really changed when I did the Surge Fellowship a few years ago. So
Yeah.
did not plan to get an education, but the bug got me and I'm stuck. I'm here forever.
So I gotta know, are you from Chicago? Did you grow up there?
I am born and raised in Chicago.
I love that town. So let me ask you this. What was that teacher for you that potentially planted a seed in you that you loved when you were growing up?
Oh my God. There are so many, so many, so many. And I think if I forget anybody, they'll get mad at me. But I think there are a few that I can certainly point to. In elementary school, I did not like school at all. I did not like it. I don't know if it was just I felt like I couldn't work hard enough to get good grades. Like maybe my penmanship needed to be better. But there was a music teacher, Mr. Love, who actually lived one block away from me. Was certainly a game changer in the early part of my educational experience. He like taught me the love of music. It was like an opportunity for me to feel successful by performing in front of my family and my peers. And I was fortunate to go to a selective enrollment high school in Chicago that had about 5,000 students. And it was extremely diverse. And I had two teachers, Mr. Maslenka, who was my advisor, but also explained to me that you talk a lot. And that's not a problem. I'm not giving you a check or a punishment for that, but maybe you should join the debate team. And it allowed me to leverage my extrovert and talkativeness in a much more meaningful, strategic, and academic way. And then I had Miss Coleman Parker, who was an exceptional teacher, who helped me like realize the beauty in being a Black man in Chicago and what that meant and the responsibility that they held as well. And so I think the combination of those three very diverse and different types of teachers helped me see myself beyond a book but really see myself as the person I could be in the future and the impact that I could make, even at a much early age. And I still am really, really good friends with all three of them to this day.
So overall, who has been that inspiration or hero for you in your career? Who has fueled this drive and motivation you've had?
I would honestly say my parents. Um, Neither one of my parents were college educated. My dad moved from Mississippi at the young age of 18 after some time in the military, and moved to Chicago from Tunica, Mississippi. My mother's from Henry Horner Projects here in Chicago. And my mother had two daughters at a very young age, 15 and 16 years old. And I came many, many years later, but my dad's selflessness and hard work really was a motivation and an inspiration for me that it was the only thing that I knew. You work hard, you give, you care deeply for people, and the universe will respond back to you. And to see my father, who lacks the education, lacks the experience, but was able to take care of a family and show that unconditional type of love was exactly what I needed to go into the challenging work of nonprofit work that requires a lot of passion, but does not have its limits on challenges and barriers. But his resilience kind of lives through me. And I'm fortunate to have like both of my parents still here with me as a motivation and a little kick in the butt, even as an adult when I need it. So yes.
So, as someone that had aspirations of becoming a president by 2020, I want to know this. What what political figure exists in the world that you've looked up to that you would love to meet? spend some time and see how they operate?
I would, sir, as a Chicago kid through and through, and actually a little bit upset that I did not learn about this person until I got to college, I would have to say Fred Hampton.
Okay.
um, because I did not realize how young he was at mobilizing people and garnering a type of attention and purpose for his people and doing it with so much courage, with all the risk around him, and to put himself in a position at such a young age to be so selfless, to not intentionally give his life, but we certainly should honor all that he did from a life that was taken. And so, as a Chicago person, I certainly look up to a person like a hero, not just Harold Washington, but Fred Hampton, as an inspiration for me and the type of impact that I would like to make and build more of those Fred Hamptons across our city.
So, I think in education now, there's kind of this elephant in the room, so to speak. It's just gotten increasingly difficult. Like you said, there's that Rip Van Winkle thing where no matter what time you wake up, education's always kind of been this timeless entity. A classroom is going to look the same, essentially. Everything's kind of presented the same way. It's a tough field. There's a lot that's going on. The clashing of this modern post-pandemic world and everything that's going on. I mean, I could go on and on, but my point is this. What is it that has allowed you to stay in this education game, to operate at the highest level that you can, have empathy for these kids, and to continue to help and enrich them? What's that energy for you?
And I will first start to say in these kind of extremely challenging times, daunting times, scary times, in the space of education, because change, no matter what, is always going to be a challenge for any person, any organization. Um, it has truly been my Surge community. Um, I probably would have left this work a long time ago. I have three master's degrees, political science, education, and business. I feel like I could have gone anywhere and pretty much figured out how to do pretty much
Yeah.
anything. And I think one of my most challenging times of education at the murder of George Floyd, um, I was ready to leave, but at that time I was in the Surge Fellowship, and it completely changed the way that I felt. I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel isolated.
Yeah.
Leadership and education can certainly feel very isolating. Leadership is very lonely, and it allowed me to have 24 other amazing, extremely brilliant um, folks who were probably much more resilient and persistent than I was, around me to continue to inspire me and push me and motivate me and be the ear that I needed and the shoulder that I needed during some of those most challenging times. It built my confidence not only in my executive skills, whether that's negotiating or building out strategic plans, but also led a lot of heart and spirit work that reminded me that this is not the first challenge that has been in the space of education, a nonprofit, or the world. Our folks have been resilient from our inception. I think about Black folks as slaves to make it through the torture that they did and still come out and figure it out and become inventors and writers and actors and innovators and creators, educators. And I stand on the shoulders of all those folks. And why stop now?
Yeah.
I'm going to be okay. And our CEO and founder, Carmita Saman, just shared that recently at our Ascension, our 10-year celebration, as a reminder from the great lyricist Kendrick Lamar, is that we're going to be all right. And so, as long as we got each other, we have community, um, we have everything else inside of us, that no matter what, we're going to be fine. And so, knowing that I have to think beyond what I can produce as an individual, but giving the type of impact into and pouring into others and pouring into the future, that I'm okay with seeing the fruits of the labor that we're doing today that I may not see while I'm on this earth, but knowing that someone who needs it will benefit, whether that's in 50, 100, 200, 500 years from now, they're going to benefit from the tiny seeds that we are planting today to build and grow that great oak tree that I know that we'll have. So grateful for this community that keeps me going,
Yeah.
because every day I probably would want to retire and
Yeah.
just give up. but yeah, certainly grateful for this community.
Wonderful answer. So let me ask you this. If you have a dream tonight, you ran into that young version of you before you decided education was your world and your future, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've gained along the way, what advice would you impart on that young version of you?
Mhm. I would remind myself to be gentle with myself, to know that I will be okay, but to be gentle, provide myself grace, and all the radical self-love that I need. I think that am extremely hard on myself. In my top five strength finders, it's achiever, competition, and woo. And so I want to win people over and I want to be successful and I want to win. And I think that has been me since a child, but I was extremely tough on myself and probably why I didn't like enjoy elementary school as much. Um, but I would remind myself to give myself that grace, to have the courage to take the risk to do the thing. It is not a loss, it's a lesson, and that's just going to be a part of life. And so I try to leave with that as much as I can as an adult, but I would certainly tell myself to give myself a little bit more grace and love.
So, of all of these things that you've evolved to in your career and accomplished along the way, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
Oh my God, that is such a hard and difficult challenge. That is a hard question. Wow. I just it's like so many things, but so little things at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, I would say, because I still kind of stalk my students, um, from the third grade class to this day, they're college graduates at this point, and they're thriving. They are doing great. And for me, that's probably one of most the accomplishment that I'm most proud of because as a teacher, you are often thrown into a classroom with, here's a curriculum, good luck, go for it.
Yeah.
We'll be around to observe you, give you some feedback. But somebody trusted me to get in front of these kids, and that at the third grade, which is a very critical year, which we all know that prisons are built based off third grade data, that someone entrusted me and I actually did my absolute best, that at least I did something to keep them motivated, inspired, to create a better future for themselves and to see them thriving to this day. And some of them may remember me, some of them may not, but to know that during that 10 months that I had them, I dropped some seed to make this world a little bit better with exponential impact through them from me. And knowing that I'm probably continue to do that through this day, but to see them on Facebook thriving brings me so much joy and continued motivation and inspiration. And they have no idea.
So, as the man behind the mission, everyone has this perception or an idea of who they think you are. Your family does, your friends do, all the students, all of your colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of who you are? Who do you think you are?
I am a man who does it terrified. I do it all scared. I do it. I remind myself that we are all on this world at the same time, figuring it out.
Yeah.
And I probably give others a lot more grace than I give myself, but I constantly remind myself that everything that I've done and everything I had to accomplish, I've done it through fear, um, through disbelief in myself. Um, but I know at my core, I'm a problem solver. I'm a person who's going to figure it out. And I thrive sometime in that space. And so, what people may not know, where I may come off extremely confident, very charismatic, and I'm a lot of fun, but in certain professional spaces, one as a black man growing up in a space that not a lot has been poured into, like the belief in yourself and knowing your history and the greatness that you can bring. I've been fortunate to have some folks who poured into me that way, but it has allowed me to operate with courage, even when I'm terrified and filled with fear and and not knowing if I will be successful. But I do it. I do it.
So let's say we get off this call and a time machine pulls up, and you can go anywhere in the history of that great city of Chicago and see one event unfold before your eyes. What would you want to see? Maybe two events. You can add to it.
Okay, okay. That's good. That's good. I would certainly would like to be at the time where Mayor Harold Washington was elected as mayor of Chicago.
Yeah,
We have learned a lot in our program because we dive deeply into the history of Chicago, but to hear and the type of celebrity, not the type of celebrity that we have today, but the type of celebrity steeped in purpose that Mayor Harold Washington had for the city and the love for his people and the challenges that he kind of faced. I would have loved to have been there at that time where there was the type of collective action across Black and Brown folks, that there was love and there was the belief of our collective success and win as a people in the city of Chicago that is steeped not just in a political party or a side of town, but really about the people and our collective win. And I just would love to feel that type of energy that I don't know if we felt here in the city of Chicago in a very, very, very long time. But there was power there when my parents still speak about this, my
yeah,
aunts and uncles, my grandparents, and the books and all the learning are still going there. And so that is certainly a time, but a time that I was a part of that I would love to just be at that moment again was the day that Barack Obama was elected as president,
man.
and to be in Grant Park with all the city of Chicago cheering and just feeling. Um, the possibility for me as a young Black man at that time in political science who had that dream of being president, like it was no longer the fear of would I get killed, would people vote for me, but I know that I would be safe. I know that if I work hard enough, that people would entrust in me. And so while I may not want to be president anymore, I still kind of take that moment and in other leadership spaces because that was a pivotal moment for me to see and witness firsthand. So if I could have those two
Man,
opportunities and maybe bring those vibes and feel to my every single day across the city, I would jump in that time machine fast.
I saw uh, President Obama when he came to Kansas City during the campaign in '08, and it was so cool because he was at Liberty Memorial, and it's kind of on a hill over Kansas City. And I remember my son was really small, and we had to leave a little bit early to not get in the deluge of people, and to hear his voice boom over downtown and to feel that energy. It was so cool, man. What a great time. What a cool
It
time.
was a great,
Man,
great
I
time.
loved it. I miss it so much, so much.
Same, same.
So, if anyone wants to reach out to you, they want to find more out about Surge, any of the good business in your world, where do they go?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, go to our website, the surgeinstitute.org. You can also find us on all social media platforms, Surge Institute. So if you are an education leader, and I say at all levels from classroom to superintendent, or we have lawyers in our fellowship, if you're a person who's indirectly impacting young people and need a space to learn, to grow through head, heart, and spirit work, certainly reach out to the Surge Institute at surgeinstitute.org.
So, Shannon, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. Keep doing the wonderful work, man. We need it.
Thank you so much, Joe. You have a
Thank you.
great day.
You too.